Hello, everybody. Welcome to the weekly Backdrop call. It's September 29th, 2016. We're really excited to have everybody here today and talk about the future of Backdrop. We're really excited to have everybody here today and talk about. Hang on, I've got a. Sorry, broadcast problem. Okay. Okay, general announcements. Calabox. Calabox was released. Final version. It has native Backdrop support. We're working on getting our Docker image all up to date so that when you use Calabox, you'll get the latest version of Backdrop as well. But Calabox has always had really excellent Backdrop support, so you can install Backdrop through Calabox real easily.
It's up to date.
Oh, and it's up to date?
Yep, 1.5.0.
Awesome. So latest version of Calabox, latest version of Backdrop, and you can actually use the Docker image directly without Calabox, but Calabox makes it nice and easy and integrates with things like Pantheon, which is really cool. You can donate to Backdrop visiting backdropcms.org/contribute. And you can get in exchange a thank you Dragon hoodie or t-shirt, which there are samples of at that URL. If you join the Backdrop Contrib group, I see that we've been getting some new Contrib authors in the past couple of weeks. You can get a free PHP Storm license to use for open source development. If you're interested in getting a PHP Storm license and you're a member of the Backdrop Contrib group, you can email us, info@backdropcms.org, and we will hook you up with a license. Updates from the Project Management Committee. We have a group of individuals that are responsible for setting the overall direction of the project. And every week, if we have announcements from the PMC, then we say them here. And this week, we actually do have an announcement, which is why I gave the little extra intro. We have an announcement that we took a vote and it has passed about implementing a feature freeze before releases, which would be helpful so that we don't have the last minute cramming like we have for every one of our 6 releases. But we're doing it really a pretty modest feature freeze. We're only pushing it 2 weeks out, 14 days before. And that feature freeze is literally feature freeze. It's not actually a full code freeze. It just means that the wording of it, I don't think we've published yet. Is that right, Jen? Sorry, I muted you. The exact wording of it.
We haven't written any wording anywhere official yet, but I put something somewhere. I think it was in that issue. I'll go grab it.
Yeah, it's basically stating if it's a feature and if it's tagged as a feature as such in the issue queue, we have to merge it before the 2-week window before release. And then once we've entered into the feature freeze, all new features, any issue tagged with feature can no longer be merged, which is completely reasonable. We'll still be able to do things like fix bugs, change strings, those sorts of things, all the way right up until the release. So it's a really pretty modest policy just to keep us from doing a whole lot of crazy merging the day before release.
So I found the wording, and this actually came from Wes. I just modified like one sentence. But it says 2 weeks before release, any issues tagged with feature request in the point release milestone that have not been committed will be bumped to the next point release milestone. After that point, we want to focus on the features that have been committed, get them finished, tested, and fix any bugs before we release.
Great, and we have yet to publish that on the website as official policy. I imagine we'll put this into the handbook, probably under release cycle, would make a lot of sense, where we already document our regular release schedule and the way that releases work. So that's a to-do item because that vote was pretty much just completed. So let's go into the next item on the agenda, which is infrastructure tasks. Those are things around Backdrop the project that aren't necessarily the software itself. And the first item we have on here is Backdrop CMS with Pantheon / Drush / updating with an update from
Yep, so we have it detecting, Pantheon is detecting site local Drush installs, and you can definitely use Drush commands through Terminus. But when you like check to run update when you're doing a code merge on the Pantheon dashboard, doesn't seem to be picking that up. So I think the next step is to ping Greg, because he seems to be on board saying that Drush is working with the Pantheon backdrop instances, but I don't think he knows specifically that checking the dashboard doesn't seem to be running update.php, for example.
Yeah, I posted in that issue last week and like tested a whole bunch of different things with the dashboard. The clearing caches didn't work, running update didn't work, a bunch of stuff. And I asked him if I should open an issue in the like Pantheon world for the dashboard. And he said we should open an issue and then respond to him with like a ticket number or something, or have the Pantheon people do it. So he knows it's not working, but we don't know why.
Yeah, I did that.
Okay.
Opened a Pantheon ticket, and he responded back in the backdrop issue on GitHub. And he has an example of Drush commands being executed, but I don't know that he did that through the dashboard. So it's on me, I think, to update it and say specifically through the dashboard we don't seem to be getting responses.
Okay. My comment had a bunch of screenshots, so it should be clear it was the dashboard that wasn't working. But that might have been a different issue too. There's like a, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like his response is using like a site alias. So
yeah, I
perhaps
had the site alias is working as well, which is why the dashboard is some kind of crazy magic. I don't know why it's not working.
So we'll just bring it specifically to his attention that the dashboard part.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, excellent. Great. The next item on the agenda is, this is actually kind of related to the software, but creating a checklist for every release so that we make sure that all of the tasks around that release are completed. And Gregory Klonos made a really excellent checklist as a demonstration at issue 2226 for the 1.51 release. Which is looking really good, actually. I really like this idea. But the idea is that we'll make a checklist in the procedures repository that is basically the things that need to be done for each release. And then we make an issue, copying and pasting that checklist into the issue queue, and then check off the items to make sure that every single item gets completed. And that includes, because there's actually quite a bit of things that end up happening, tagging the release, updating the homepage on backdropcms.org, release notes, announcements, newsletter for some of them, updating Pantheon, for example, what we just talked about, the Docker image, and actually sending the newsletter as another item. So I think this is great because the number of things that we've got keeps increasing as we have more additional systems and channels through which Backdrop is distributed. And making sure that every one of those tasks gets updated after every release is a great thing for us to be doing on an official basis. That looks great. I don't think there's anything more to say about that, though, other than it's in progress and it's looking good.
Well, the issue was we need to finish that stuff.
Oh.
So not to create the list, but to actually do the things on the list.
Okay, well that's a great idea. And so it looks like I've got this down below, but it looks like we're suggesting that we won't push out to Pantheon until 151 is released. Is that the plan?
Yeah, and that was just something we'd been doing historically, because if we push a first release and then everybody updates it and then we push a follow-up release like a week later, then everyone gets prompted to update it again immediately when we know we can fix those bugs. I don't know if that's a process change that we should just push every release, but but that's what we had been doing. So that's what the list says.
Well, it's possible once we implement feature freeze that we'll have more stable releases on day one, and maybe we can start pushing them out immediately. But I think for now, the slow rollout is not a bad policy. People can always update their own Pantheons if they wanted to immediately, but yeah, I think waiting a little while is not a bad policy so far.
Okay, so let's leave that for this one, and then for 1.6 we can change it if we feel like 1.6 is stable. From then on out, we can do it the other way.
What happens if you update it yourself on Pantheon, like you just update your system, but it's still connected to the upstream? Will it have conflicts when it actually then you try to do the upstream interface?
I haven't had any yet. Like usually, so I've done that a couple of times. Like I have a couple of my Pantheon sites running 1.5 now, and it'll just merge politely. Like you'll still get prompted, but then I haven't had any conflicts when it actually does that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's using Git underneath the hood, but I think it also has an additional layer of logic on there that is a little bit more aggressive in automatically resolving conflicts.
There's checkbox for that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. The next item on the agenda is infrastructure tasks. Jen, do you want to take it?
Sure. No, we already talked about a couple of these infrastructure. So we're on website. So we are trying to figure out how to make these weekly meetings less repetitive and more productive for all the people who are attending. So what we did is move all of the web development tasks into the outreach meeting last week. And then we wanted to move the web development tasks back into the weekly meeting this week, but I couldn't find them for the meeting. So I just dropped in the 3 that were most important. I have to go back like 2 weeks and find them. But I dropped in the 3 that were most important that I think we should talk about. And that is the number one thing that people ask for when we tell them about Backdrop is for a list of sites that are running them or showcases about people that are currently using it. So that's the number 1 priority for the website. Number 2 priority I have here is documentation, because it is so almost done. We already have this very comprehensive set of documentation for almost all of Backdrop. And I know Tom's working on reviewing it. Doc Wilmot has a plan for how to structure it. We've got like an entire team working on cleaning it up. We've got Clonos inserting screenshots, and it looks fantastic. And I would love to just get that to a point where we can link it in the menu. And I think it's almost there. And then after we can get the documentation done, which I think is right around the corner, I want to focus on setting up the forum, which is something that I know people have been clamoring about for years, but making a place where people can ask questions about Backdrop and talk about it that isn't necessarily GitHub. We've got a couple of issues already going on in GitHub that maybe shouldn't be happening in GitHub, but that's the only place we have for it to go. And I know that I think Doc Wilmot has done a ton of work on the forum module already to make it work for Backdrop. He's got a pull request in the core queue just so that we could get a sandbox to give it a test. So if anyone wants to give that a test, forum is going to be next on the list too. I'm hoping that we can get documentation out of the way here quickly, so that can be our next focus. But there are a ton of other things that we're working on backdropcms.org, the website. We're thinking about doing some kind of a design refresh for the homepage, since Backdrop has been out for 2 years, trying to make it a little bit more compelling. But we need, so we've got, we've got a meeting with a content strategy marketing guy. I think it's next Thursday, Wes. I know you said you were interested in how that was going to go. I'll send you an invite to that and see. It was supposed to be last Friday, but I had a horrible meeting a wonderful meeting that ran very long. But yeah, so we rescheduled. I'll get you on that, so if you can come if you want. And then hopefully we'll try and figure out like exactly what to do to the website to make it do a better job of telling people what Backdrop actually is. We also have some problems with modules, themes, and layouts defined pages, which I think are actually less of a priority now that we have Project Browser and Core, but I would love to get image support in there somehow. So for themes and layouts, you can actually see what they're doing. And then there's other stuff going on backdropcms.org that I don't remember. Oh, we've got GitHub integration so that you can sign in with your GitHub account. But I think that needs to be tested. It's kind of stuck in a, like, how do you test it if you're not allowed to test it from your local site? And yeah, there's other stuff I don't remember, but I'll eventually find the list of tasks and we can put it back in the agenda. But yeah, okay. So we move on to Backdrop CMS itself. Nate, do you want to take it back over?
Yeah, sorry, I'm meeting. So let's talk about Backdrop. So Backdrop 1.5 came out 2 weeks ago, which was fantastic. I'd say it's probably our least, let's not say it that way, our most stable minor release that we've pushed out, because there hasn't been any really serious issues with the 1.5 release. However, we do have a number of items that are tracked through 151 and a list of really rather important bug fixes that we're prioritizing. So you can check the tracker for 151 issues just by looking at the 151 milestone, and most of these, some of them are regarding, well, a lot of them are regarding new things that we added, like little issues with basis, CSS fix. So the items that are slated as important bug fixes, basically those that are so important, as soon as we fix any of them, we will probably make the next minor release or the next bug fix release. We've got 4 of them slated here in the agenda. One of them is issue 2219, which is images are not able to be inserted into custom blocks, which is really ironic because we did a lot of work to make it so that exact thing actually works properly. But what actually ended up happening here is that images are available to insert if you insert the block through the layout UI, but if you go over to the custom blocks UI, the ability to insert an image has been removed. So we got it half right. So basically, it's possible as long as you go through ways of adding and configuring a block. But we need to make it so that if you go through the custom blocks UI, you should also be able to insert an image through that interface. So that one's really pretty trivial. I volunteered to take that one on today. I think that'll be pretty easy to fix. The next item we've got is that homepage layout is not set to drop down. This is because we added this ability to have drop downs, and we added a homepage layout, but we did them in such an order that I think we added the homepage first and we added drop downs later, that the homepage didn't get updated to include the drop down menu capability out of the box, which is really confusing because you think that it would work, and it does work on every page except for the home page, and so it can be really, really freaking confusing. So the nice thing is that one's really trivial to fix. We just need to change the settings on the primary menu block in the homepage layout. There's already a pull request for that, but it's been brought up that an update hook would probably be appropriate, because it's really unlikely that people would have set their homepage primary menu to be a hierarchical drop down or a hierarchical tree, because that's the option that makes the least sense, even though it was the only option we ever had before. I also want to call out, just as an aside, how excited I am about the drop-down menus, and in particular the CSS or the markup cleanup around that. That now that we have this drop-down style instead of the hierarchical tree style. Hierarchical tree style is what added all of that nasty CSS that added the little arrows and the dots and the leaf and the last and all of that crap. Yeah, exactly. So now when you change the style to hierarchical or top level only, the CSS no longer affects your menus. So you don't, as a theme, you don't need to undo all of that crap, which is just so great. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. All the classes are actually still there, but the CSS now targets specifically the tree structure version. So there's a specific class that is added for hierarchical tree or top level only, or drop down. And so you can target each one of those styles individually. Very exciting. And for 1.6, we're hoping that we'll expand that out to a more comprehensive ability to provide other types of menu styles. But for now, these things are hard-coded as those three: top level, drop down, and hierarchical tree. Anyway, very exciting. Anyway, we need to fix the homepage layout to use the drop down. That's the issue. And that number is 2,222. Let's see, another item on here, the installer manual upload of a module zip file doesn't work. That's issue 1920. I would say this is an important bug fix, but it's been stuck with us for the entire 1.4 release ever since we added the ability, or ever since we added Project Browser. This one's a tricky one. At least I couldn't figure it out on my first pass. So anyone that's has the time and interest to figure out that problem, that would be a really great one to dive into, because it's a little tricky. It has something to do with the fact that our module upload in the installer is in a dialog, and uploading a file from within a dialog is causing some particularly weird problem. So I'm not quite sure how to describe it, because I also hadn't been able to figure out why it was happening. Let's see. And the last item that we have here, as far as important bug fixes, we'd like to make it so that the basis theme provides a full bleed hero, probably through overriding the homepage single column template for the layouts. But it doesn't look like in the agenda here, we've just got a to-do basically for the issue number. Do we have an issue for this yet? Is anyone aware? Wes is nodding.
It is 2190 is the issue number. I had a couple other ones that I think are important, but they're all in the project for basis. So quite a few of them have pull requests. There's one where basically, for really boring reasons, if you override skin.css, it doesn't override some of the components that were being added in template.php. The CSS is being added in template.php. So I moved everything into the info file because fixing the problem any other way would be really hairy, and there's really not that much CSS that wasn't in the info file. So and CSS performance is like ridiculously good. So we're not really losing out on anything. And then there's an accessibility fix. At some point, I was smoking a lot of crack and put a PX font size on the body tag, and I shouldn't have. So fix that. And then the other one is, oh no, okay. The other one, I mentioned it backwards. So the other one is when you override skin.css, some of the image links broke, and that one's kind of a weird one. If you override skin.css, basically we're going to have to expect that someone copies the images folder from basis, at least as a starting point, and they can manipulate how they want. But then the status messages come from a core folder, so that gets really hairy really quick. I think I had a fix. Oh, yes, I did. I did have a fix that I think is good enough, but I feel like maybe we could do better. So that one maybe needs some review. And then I added some documentation of basis.
Yeah, didn't you? You started using a GitHub board. What are those called?
The project. Yep. It's,
for all of those things, maybe we could just link that here in the agenda. Yeah, we have yet to actually figure out how to effectively use the GitHub projects. The integration isn't the greatest between the issue queue and the projects, but I think it's fine right now. We're basically just kind of experimenting with how well those work and what we can use them for. Anybody right now that has commit access to the issues repository can also create a project, which is one of those, what are those boards called? There was a Kanban board. Yeah. Anyone can create one of those. And if you have a good reason to do so, I would say go for it. Because I think experimenting with how we can most effectively use GitHub's projectability is the only way that we're going to figure out how we should actually use these in the first place. So awesome.
I would also say if anybody wants to play with those and you don't have commit access to the issue queue, anyone who adds a comment is supposed to automatically get access. But for some reason, I think that robot task is not actually firing. You have to create a pull request in order to get commit access. So if you haven't created a pull request and you want commit access, we can just add you manually for now. So if you're watching this and you want to play with it, let us know.
Okay, that's it for the important bug fixes section. And so now we'll talk about the release that will be 4 months from now, the 1.6 release, which is scheduled to be January 15th, 2017. And as noted during the announcements phase, that means that we will have a feature freeze on January 1st, 2017. So we've got a number of items already slated for the 1.6 release. Some of them are items that didn't make it into 1.5, and some of them are new. The first of which is adding a reference module to core. That's issue 1301. We did a lot of work on a reference module, or I should say Mike did a lot of work on a reference module in the last release, but we were unable to get that integrated adequately into core and figure out what to do with our existing reference modules and an upgrade path and all of those things. So
actually,
have an update there.
Yeah, actually, I didn't get nearly as far as I wanted to in the last cycle, so I'm definitely doubling down and doing it this one. The one thing, so what I'm trying to do with the module is make it so since we can make changes to the entity system, slight ones, or at least add additional information about all the core entities, what I want to do is be able to have the reference field be able to reference multiple different entity types in a single field. So if you want to have an event or something and related things and link both like places and people in the same field, have it be able to do that. The actual data storage for that isn't that hard. The field entering values is not that hard, but the place where I'm not sure how to handle everything is the views integration. Because it would mean, joining a whole bunch of additional tables, and if you were, and all of the fields attached to all of the different entity types that that field could reference. So I'm worried that it would get overwhelming for the users when using views. So I just have need to think about that some more and actually play around with things. But if anyone has any views integration experience, I would enjoy help with it.
So one thing we were talking about in the last cycle was that being able to reference different types of entities is not a deal breaker for core. Like if we can only reference nodes or users separately, that's fine because those are in the same tables and the views integration is easy there. If we need to add this other thing on as a contrib module later, that's totally fine, and it's like that for core down the road. So I'd say, now that we have a little more time, we can play with it a little bit, but it is not necessary for core to get that in there.
Yeah. It's not necessary, but yeah, I think this could be like one of the things that could distinguish, Backdrop from, Drupal in terms of actually providing some more functionality and making more sense. But yeah, if I can't figure out the multiple entity type targets, then yeah, we should definitely just check the version where you can just target one entity type for this next release. And that's it.
Okay, so I know we have a new plan in place for, or we may soon have a new plan in place for how to work on like huge features that are going into core, and we'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But it would be great if we could get, I don't know, I think we have a new renewed focus on entity references, however, whatever this turns out to be in the long run. I would love for us to be able to test our new, like adding big features to core policy, procedure, whatever it is we're doing on this feature and see how that goes for 1.6. I know Wes ran into some problems with our current process for that, trying to add bases to 1.5. We ran into some previous issues in 1.4 with layouts and stuff that ended up having to go in at the last minute. So I would just say, like, through this cycle, everybody give us as much feedback on how this is going as possible. We want to make it so that we're not putting too much pressure on the person that's responsible for the feature. So it's not like all Wes doing basis all the time and all Mike doing entity reference. Like, the more we can offload the work and make it easy for people to know where they can help, the better. So if anyone has an idea of, like, maybe we can use this new project feature in GitHub, it would be great to get feedback on, like, how that could be useful, just to kind of make sure that we're using the tools that we have to the best of our ability and not overloading our people in the process. So keep that in mind. Also, we don't, so currently the only feature we've got slated for 1.6 is references, because it did get bumped from 1.5. But there were a couple of other issues in the 1.5 cycle where we started talking about other solutions to the same problem. And one of the things I added to the list was trying to figure out how to get some sort of a file entity UI or a media browser or whatever WordPress calls their upload an image dashboard thing going in Backdrop, because that is something that is a big issue. It's kind of a big hole in terms of something Drupal has solved and Backdrop doesn't. It's something that's really important to our kind of WordPress style users, and we don't have a clear solution for how to solve that issue in Backdrop yet. I kind of don't want to put this media type solution thing on the list for 1.6 because I would love to focus on entity reference first. I think that coming up with some kind of smarter entity solution will also help our media problem, especially if we end up with more of a file entity like solution there too. So I put this on the agenda a couple of weeks ago, that adding a media file entity solution for 1.6, but I'm now feeling like maybe we should push that to 1.7.
I definitely think that doing file entity would be, great for this upcoming release. I mean, most of the pieces there are there on the back end is basically just creating a user interface that exposes the file entities to the user and allows them to, like, manage them.
So would it
it's more of a front-end UX thing.
Same time as the entity reference thing, or do you think it should?
Oh, it's entirely separate. They don't really touch. Like, you know, both of them are accessing basically the entity API, but the entity API is there for the most part. So it's basically just, especially with the file stuff, it's just exposing stuff that's already there. Because we already have file entities, we just don't have a user interface for managing them.
Okay. Well, then maybe I'll leave it on 1.6, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, spot on. I was going to say the same thing. The thing that where it will get a little bit blurry is whether or not we want files to be fieldable. But that can be an iteration. Like, we can add the UI for managing files, just so that you can find and delete them and update them and whatever. And then potentially making them fieldable, which is part of file entity in Drupal 7. That could get a little bit messy, but we can do one thing at a time. Add the user interface for managing files, fieldable possibly, and then like the in-browser abilities like media module like stuff. That is almost certainly going to take a more comprehensive effort. So,
yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Okay, great.
Do you want me to continue, Jen?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the last other item we've got in here is the rich text editor meta issue, which is issue 1087. We've got a bucket load of ideas to make the rich text editor experience better. We fixed a number of bugs in the 1.5 release, which was fantastic, but there's a lot of features and abilities that we could do in the rich text editor that would make the experience a lot better. Things like drag and drop uploads or copy paste uploads, and adding support for things like code tags, those sorts of things. We did really improve a number of items in the 1.5 release, especially in the out-of-box experience of the editor configuration. But there's a lot of things we could actually do feature-wise to make that rich text editor a lot more powerful. So that issue is in meta, issue 1087, and there's a lot of ideas within there of things that we could potentially improve. More items, TBD.
I have one more item that I'd like to add, and we have a ticket number 1886. It's the one about reusing blocks in different layouts. That's actually been something that I've been looking to propose ideas about for a while, and finally the discussion came up. So there's sort of several different ideas of how to handle it, so that when you have one layout and then you clone it or create another layout, that you can actually have the same blocks across all the layouts of your sites. So, there was the idea of having block instances and have a main block and then copies of it, or I was suggesting a region inheritance where when you clone a layout, all the regions start off inheriting the contents of the original until you override them. But anyway, people maybe should check that out. Maybe we can get something around that, improvements around that into the next version.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Actually, there's a lot of fantastic ideas in that issue, ranging from something like mini panels like thing, or region inheritance, or block collections, all kinds of great ideas, because that is a big issue. And the funny thing is that some of those, maybe even a lot of those items, could be implemented in Contrib as different options to do the same problem. But some of them are definitely core-driven ideas. So
I think part of the discussion is we need to be careful about not only what we do implement out of that thread, but what we don't. Just because some of the ideas could provide a lot of extra complexity that wouldn't be good.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Yeah, I think that would. I think that would be a great issue. I'm not sure. Actually, we don't really even have an official process for deciding major critical items for minor releases. I mean, I guess we could take a poll here amongst the people present, but I think previously it's just kind of been, we're feeling strongly about this. Let's add it to the agenda. So I guess that is the process. So there we go.
I mean, I guess you could have a PMC vote, because that sort of seems like the project management committee could do.
Yeah,
to officially decide that, just to give us something to do.
Okay. Yeah, maybe actually we should have an entire thread just around all of these, and then work out the overall agenda per release. Okay, excellent. Well, another great issue. There's also a bunch of issues that are just tagged for the 1.6 release, features that we think would be attractive but may not be of super high importance. But if we get them done, then that's fantastic. And you can check out those by looking at the 1.6 milestone on GitHub. And as always, you can hit up backdropcms.org/roadmap for the overall planning strategy of Backdrop for 1.6 and beyond. I think mostly it's actually to be determined for 1.7 and things beyond that. But to get an overall idea of how far Backdrop has come and where we're heading, you can check out that URL. Let's see, that's it for Backdrop the product. Any other additions or anything you guys want to bring up?
I think that's it. I think that's it. I think that's it for Backdrop the product. Any other additions or anything you guys want to bring up?
Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up? Anything you guys want to bring up?
I want to say thank you, Tom, for volunteering to help us with all of our documentation.
Okay, so the next section is community growth. And normally Gregory does this section, but I'm not sure that it's.
I updated it because I noticed he wasn't here.
Okay. Do you want to give the rundown then?
Sure. It looks like Jeff updated it too. So I was looking at that and I'm like, how is this number not changed? But it's because he already got there. Thank you, Jeff. Sure. So let's see. Since our last Backdrop meeting, we now have 315 total Contrib projects for Backdrop. That's 2 since the last time we talked about it. We have 230 with official releases, which is +1 since last week. We have 369 releases on backdropcms.org. So that's 2 since the last meeting. And those are releases that are for previous projects, so projects that are getting updated as opposed to projects that are new. We have 51 total Contrib authors. We've got 1 new person since last week, and that's Daryl. So welcome, Daryl, to Backdrop. I think he ported the RESTful module from Drupal 7. So if anyone wants that for Backdrop, it exists. We still have 15 pending applications. Those are probably the same people who applied a year ago or so and haven't been back. And we have 30 organization profiles now on backdropcms.org, which is 3 since the last meeting, and 370 user accounts on backdropcms.org, which is 10 since the last meeting. And then, Jeff, do you want to do Backdrop downloads since you updated that number?
Sure. 6,624 downloads of Backdrop CMS, plus 145 since last meeting.
That's still super impressive. We had a huge boost there after we released 1.5. I still think people are excited about it, and that's why we've got this big bump in downloads. So good job, everybody.
Okay, excellent. All right, so upcoming events. You can check out backdropcms.org/events for a list of things that are coming up. The first one on that list, I'm sure many of us are excited about, which is Bad Camp, which comes up October 20th through the 23rd, at which there will be multiple Backdrop things. We've got, I think, multiple sessions even, maybe. But we do have an all-day summit and an all-day training. So we'll have 2 full days of Backdrop fun at Bad Camp, as well as sessions during the actual camp itself. So it's going to be really exciting. Jen and I, of course, are local. So and Mike are local, so we'll all be there. Oh, and Luke.
Not that local anymore.
Just getting everybody that's in the area.
I have to fly in this year. It sucks.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, you're not local anymore.
I used to be. I used to be local. Now I have to fly.
Well, anyway, Bad Camp will be a great event for Backdroppers. But there's also a lot of other items coming up. Actually, Drupal South, another event at which there will be a Backdrop project committee member. Gregory Klonos will be there presenting on Backdrop. And then lots of things going into November and the year beyond. There's also an iCal feed. If you're interested, you can get that from the events page on backdropcms.org.
Can you guys add the summit and stuff onto that? Because I just looked at the dates, and right now it just has the usual this meeting scheduled for that Thursday.
Yeah, that's a good idea. To be a little bit more comprehensive about. Oh wait. Oh, you're saying the events aren't on the calendar, the iCal feed.
Right.
Oh. Jen, do you know about that?
Yeah, I can check. There are 2 iCal feeds. The meetings shouldn't be on the events one.
No, I guess I was looking at the meeting. Anyway, but then we're probably not having this regular meeting, so we should probably remove that from the meetings one. Unless we do want to have a meeting hour of the summit.
Oh, good point. That there may or may not be a meeting that week. We might just call in. Sometimes I think we've done similar crazy things like that.
Mm,
We could set up a computer at the summit too, so if anyone wants to call in and look at it, maybe take part remotely or something, we could probably figure something out, right?
Yep. Okay. Well, Jen, I'll leave that to you to manage the calendar. Okay. That's the end of the agenda. We have got an open Q&A session or general discussion. Anybody have anything that they would like to add or bring up that we haven't mentioned so far?
I'd like to put on the table for either 1.6 or something, some upcoming release. This issue I just put into the chat there, number 100, which is basically a URL-less entity, whether that becomes fieldable blocks or something like paragraphs module. Basically, one use case is like if you want a slideshow view and you want, so that's a view of entities that have like maybe a picture and some text and a read more link, but you don't necessarily want a URL to those things. I always have that use case. So if that could go up for a vote for 1.6 or 1.7 with the PMC structure you guys are proposing, I would be for that.
Cool. Yeah, I also want to reiterate that it doesn't need to be a priority feature for it to actually be implemented in a minor release. Anything that is completed and like just desirable enough, we can include it at anything at any time. It's just that the featured features are really just to provide a focus for every release. Some things like Project Browser, for example, wasn't a focused feature, but then it got in anyway because it was a great feature and it was ready at the time. Yeah, that's not to say that this isn't important. As it noted, it's issue 100. We've been talking about this basically since the beginning. So yeah, I think we actually have a lot of indecision still, even on the approach that we should use. So yeah, thinking about the the approach, and if we can come up with a battle plan, then that would be great as a first step.
Yeah, the other thing we might want to do, rather than concentrating, like I think a lot of the discussion is around what to call these pageless entities. Maybe even just providing like an entity builder that can build any sort of entities through the user interface, so we don't actually have to name it. You could just say create new entity type or something like that, and then create like slideshow. So rather than allowing people to create bundles of a certain entity type that we create, we could just actually allow for the creation of new entity types through the UI. Would that work? I don't know, because I'm not sure if they need classes or whether we can just actually encode or not. But that's just an idea.
Yeah, I think my favorite approach that I've seen so far is fieldable blocks, and then people can make new blocks and they can place them in layouts if they want to. And if they want to make a block that they're going to use to make views out of, that's fine, and we don't have to introduce new vocabulary. I mean, entity is not new vocabulary, but it can be confusing for people, I think.
Yeah, I don't think we should have the word entity anywhere in the UI, but like, what is it? Like, I don't know. Like, there are some really crazy things we're going to need to figure out long term. Like, I don't remember which issue it was I was talking about. We're talking about like returning to more of a Drupal 6 style architecture where all of our entities just became nodes, and there were different kinds of nodes, where like taxonomy terms were nodes, and like trying to simplify all of this crazy abstraction we got in Drupal 7, where it's like, okay, well, maybe the node just has settings, like does it have a page or does it have an automatic view like a taxonomy term, and is it in a reference field like a taxonomy term? Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is really all the same that we've separated into different entities for some reason, but I'm not really sure it's a valid reason. And so then if it's all just going to be nodes, like, what's the difference between a block and a node? Well, it just has a path. So that's just like a setting. I don't know. Like, trying to figure out whether we want to make it more complicated with like build your own entity, or whether we want to make it less complicated. Like,
I like a lot of the stuff that Drupal 7 did with entities, and I think that it sort of was an additional level of abstraction that was needed, and it makes stuff like the entity reference field and views just a lot easier to build. So I definitely wouldn't want to get rid of that. If anything, I would say let's get rid of nodes and just call them pages and page types for Backdrop 2, just because,
But a taxonomy term is a page too. It's just a page you can reference in an entity reference field.
Okay, but pages are pages, and then taxonomy things can also have a page. I mean, we might not even need to do that. Like, if we were to make taxonomy pages like actually a view instead or something like that, because really it is.
Well, a taxonomy term is fieldable.
Yeah. Anyway, but I mean, I'm not saying that other entities can't have their own page. I'm just saying, like, it kind of makes sense to rename nodes just pages and page types, so you could have a blog page type and a basic page type.
Create a layout page too. So I think page is too loaded a term. I'm not sure if there's a right answer to this problem. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. But I'm saying I do not want to add more complexity if we can solve the same problem by removing complexity. I don't know how that's going to deal with the user interface.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, either like, I would say either we should remove node and just call them pages, or we should call like all of these custom content types nodes and not have a separate entity for these like nodes without pages. It's like we should go one way or the other, but not both. Anyway, this is a whole discussion. I think that we should have drinks. We should have drinks.
Discuss one issue at Bad Camp.
That sounds like a good idea. Maybe we should devote like an hour of the summit to like a pageless node, like brainstorm.
Yes.
It's a great idea. I'm writing that down.
Yeah, maybe we should actually have other people suggest other things to talk about at the summit too, if people have ideas.
Yeah, do you have ideas? Does anyone have ideas?
I can rant about CSS at you all if you want that.
Well, we might be. Let's frame it this way. We might want to actually have like a discussion at the summit about Backdrop 2 and start thinking about where we're headed with Backdrop 2, so we can actually start heading that way and then think about where we're going. So, and this is sort of part of that discussion.
That would be great. I have front end ideas for Backdrop 2 that need sanity checks from non-front endy people.
That would be great. Maybe we should devote, like, rather than it being a pageless node hour, it should just be a Backdrop 2 hours or something, and we can talk about everything that anyone wants to do in the future and try and figure out what our path is to get there, and also a time frame too. That's something we haven't started really thinking about, is when are we going to do a Backdrop 2? Because there's so much stuff we can do in one, but also with the whole minimal amount of change thing, maybe we should try and do it too with minimal change and see what that feels like. So yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. And just so you know, I haven't put anything up yet with this schedule for the summit, but I have gotten a bunch of speakers. So people who own websites who want to do a little kind of talk about what Backdrop has gotten them by having it. People who've built websites, like developers from other development shops, to talk about what they like and don't like about Backdrop. I'm going to get a demo from the Calabox people. I'm hoping to get a demo from the Pantheon people. So if anyone else wants to contribute, I don't know, Mike, if you have something in particular you wanted to talk about, it would be great to get you up there. Wes is going to do a little talk about subtheming and basis. So yeah, I would say anyone who wants to contribute anything, we've got a bunch of people lined up. We just have to rearrange like the schedule into a way that makes sense. But yeah, for sure, it would be great to have more people talking about more things. I think this is a fantastic idea for the afternoon too. Like if we could switch to debate during the nap time hour, I think we can prevent people from falling asleep. So.
Well, I like that, debates.
Yeah, Backdrop 2 debate.
You and I can get up and debate lots of stuff.
Oh yeah, it'll be great. We have to like change sides halfway through though.
Put
Go ahead.
Field UI as a bullet point to talk about for Backdrop 2. So that's complicated, and we need ideas of what users want.
Yeah.
I would say Views UI too, because views suck. But we could also, I'm not sure that doesn't require an API change if we change the UI, so that might not need a full version release, but still something to talk about.
But yeah, it's a talking point.
All right.
Okay. Well, let's. We're. I guess we started a little late, but we're approaching a 1 hour mark. Let's call it for the end of the official meeting. We're going to stay on after the broadcast is ended to talk about agenda items for next week, an adjustment to our normal weekly schedule. So if you're interested in setting the agenda for next week and helping flesh that out, then please stay on. But otherwise, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you everybody for watching, and see you guys next time.